welcome everyone that's here. Just before we formally start, can you please make sure that you are happy to be recorded? This session will be recorded and it will be uploaded onto the Co-op Party YouTube, I believe, later on. The names will show on the screen even if you switch your video off, so if you're not comfortable with your name being on there, just change it so that you remain anonymous. You're more than welcome to take part though. So as I was saying, this is the first event that has been offered by the Co-op Party Women's Network Committee. We were formed last year and we're trying to get a sense of working together and developing activities that the Co-op Party women members can actually be involved with and engage with. So hopefully you'll find this evening informative and enjoyable and not too long. The event incorporates a breakout session and we'd really like you to participate in the debates within those sessions. We have two sessions within the breakout, one looking at wealth and one looking at power. So the sort of things that we'd hope you'd consider is, is wealth something that the Co-op Party should be looking at, should be addressing, and if it should, how should they? So hopefully you'll get some sense of what the Co-op Party can do, how you can get involved, and what you'd like the Co-op Party to do, and we really would like that feedback. So we have we'll have two facilitators in each of the breakout rooms. We have Liz and Nina and Joyce and Lola, and they are all currently serving on the committee that was recently elected. So thank you to them for supporting this event, and hopefully everyone will be kind to you and really participate in the debate and ask lots of really interesting questions. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our three speakers this evening. We have Christina Rees, who's MP for Neath. We have Councillor Antoinette Bramble, who's Deputy Mayor of Hackney. And we have Elaine Dean, who's Vice President of the Central England Co-operative. Thank you, ladies, for giving up your evening for us. You're most welcome. So without any further ado, I will ask Christina if she'd like to start the evening off. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sandra, and thank you for inviting me to take part. A massive welcome to my fellow panelists, Antoinette and Elaine, and all the cooperators who have joined the event tonight. And I'm sure, Sandra, that you'll keep us all in order.
I'll try.
And thank you to our Reclaim the Street members, Anna, Georgia and Caitlin. And our thoughts are very much with all the women and girls who have suffered violence and have not been protected. As a Labour and Cooperative MP, I'm proud to be a member of the Cooperative Parliamentary Group. 11 of us are female out of 26, it's not bad. And we have the lovely Preet Gill as our chair. I report to the Wales Cooperative Council about our parliamentary activities, and we're very productive. We've pursued Alex Norris's Protecting Retail Workers Private Members Bill. We've done things on childcare, funeral services, making permanent the universal credit £20 uplift. We put forward amendments to the Environment Bill, and we've made sure that cooperatives were included in the Corporate Governance and Insolvency Act. And we've pointed out all the gaps in the support that the Chancellor's financial reviews and budgets didn't provide. So I got involved in politics through sport. When I was a child, I was very shy and I didn't speak all through my primary school. When I was 11, I was walking home from school one day and I got beaten up by a group of girls. So my mother thought I needed toughening up So she sent me to judo classes, and I found my voice, and some would say that I haven't stopped talking since. I got my junior black belt at 12 and my senior black belt at 13, which made me the youngest in the world. The media got hold of it, and the headline in the press was "Tomboy becomes youngest black belt in the world." I won many titles and was chosen to be a member of the GB youth team to the Munich Olympics. I wasn't able to compete because at that time, many sports did not have female events, and judo was one of them. But it was just amazing to be at the Olympics until that day. It was the Munich Olympics, and that day when there was a hostage situation in the Olympic Village, which ended in the deaths of Israeli athletes. We were all evacuated to a safe place until the decision was taken to restart the Olympics. And that was a correct decision, because terrorism, it just can't be condoned. It was a life-changing experience for me. I was born in a small South Wales village called Kenfikill, and I'd never seen a gun, and I didn't know anything about terrorism. The local Labour councillor, Megan Butcher, had raised funds for me to go to the Olympics. And when I got home, I asked Megan what it was all about. Megan suggested that I get involved in the Labour Party. At university, I played tennis and hockey, but couldn't play football or rugby because at that time, women and girls weren't allowed to. I took up squash in my 20s and played for Wales over 100 times, became the only female Squash Wales national coach, and was awarded the Sport Wales Female Coach of the Year in 2008 for my contribution to squash. There weren't many women playing squash in those days, so I played for the local men's team. And I must say that my male team members were very protective, especially when a man made all sorts of excuses for losing to a woman. I'm sure you've all been there, not in the squash court perhaps, but in similar circumstances. Then my sort of political career, I got involved as a Labour councillor and got elected to Michael Morgan in 1989, and was the youngest and one of the very few female councillors at that time. The male councillors were very, very respectful, but I always felt that they didn't take the female councillors seriously. I became a JP, and there again found myself to be one of the few female JPs on the circuit. I wanted to learn more about law, and I went to Cardiff Law School, got my LLB, and applied to the Inns of Court Schools of Law to become barrister. Very few female law students at that time, but if I thought that was challenging, when I applied for a pupillage, I soon realised that to be female and to be a mature student was probably the worst combination. I was accepted nevertheless at 30 Park Place Chambers in Cardiff, and was so fortunate to have Philip Richards and Jane Crowley QC as my pupil masters, both advocates for female representation, and I'm still in touch with them over 20 years later. I was selected for Arfon in North Wales for the Senedd elections in 2011 on an open list, which was relatively unusual. Arfon was a Plaid Cymru stronghold, so I lost, but made many friends, and I'm still in touch with them now. Pre-pandemic campaigning sessions in North Wales was really a friends reunion. I became a Labour councillor for the second time in 2012, representing the Newcastle 2-member ward on Bridgend County Borough Council. Bridgend Council Labour Group had an equal representation policy in multi-member wards. Councillors are at the cutting edge, and they work so hard to make sure that their people and their communities are equally resourced, listened to, and kept safe. None more so than during this pandemic. In 2014, I was selected to be a European candidate for Wales on a zip list, so male, female, male, female. I was number 4 on the list, so I didn't have a chance of being elected, but I campaigned all over Wales, making sure that Derek Vaughan, who was our sitting MEP, was re-elected. Again, making many new friends and catching up with old friends. And then in 2015, I became the first female MP for Neath. And I often ask myself, how did that happen? But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Anita Gale, now Baroness Gale of Blaen Rhondda, the first female General Secretary of Welsh Labour, fighting for all women shortlists. The Neath All Women shortlist was full of very capable women, and I was very fortunate to be selected. I became PPS to Charlie Faulkner, the Shadow Justice Secretary, a few months after I got elected in 2015. Then I became a Shadow Justice Minister and was made Shadow Secretary of State for Wales in Jeremy Corbyn's Shadow Cabinet in February 2017. Jeremy operated a 50-50 policy for his shadow frontbench team, but actually he achieved more women than 50-50 in his team. So how far have we come? Sport. Now women are allowed to play most sports. In squash, we've actually gone further and we've got parity for prize money, one of the few sports to achieve that. And in this May's Senedd elections, we have 20 Labour and Co-operative candidates. That's the highest number we've ever had. And 11 of those candidates are female, which is great. That's over 50%. And the Senedd Labour manifesto, Karen Wilkie, our Deputy General Secretary, worked hard to make sure that the golden thread of cooperation contained in our Own in the Future, a cooperative agenda for Wales 2021, has been included in the final Labour Party policy document for the Senedd elections. And I'm proud that the Welsh Labour government has a minister with specific responsibility for the cooperative sector. That's Lee Waters, Deputy Transport and Economy Minister. And for the first time, all 4 Police and Crime Commissioner candidates for Wales are Labour and cooperative. And for the first time, we have a female candidate, and that's Philippa Thompson, who's standing in Dyfed Powys. The Wales Cooperative Council AGM was held last week, and we elected our first female chair. That's Jackie Jones, who was our Wales MEP just before we left the European Union. And she's now a Preseli Pembrokeshire Senedd candidate. And we elected a female vice chair as well, and that's Wendy Lewis from my own Swansea Neath Talbot branch, where I'm really proud to be the vice chair. I spoke in the International Women's Day parliamentary debate last Thursday, and I paid tribute to all the women who have inspired me during my lifetime, and thanked my daughter Anne Harrod for all her love and support. And I'm so proud of the woman that she's grown into. But I pose this question to you tonight, my final remarks. What if the roles had been reversed when I was growing up? What if boys could only play tennis and hockey and couldn't play football, rugby and many other sports? What if men couldn't take part in many sports in the Olympics? What if women councillors were in the majority and held the leadership roles in every council, and men had to level up political representation by using all men shortlists? So I'd be keen to listen to your views later on, and thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Christina. That's given us a lot of food for thought. It's interesting because from a sport perspective, I've just got involved as they call them owners for Lewis Football Club, who pay their men and women the same, and they are a cooperative. So having had 3 boys and never watched football, I now watch football on a Sunday to support them. So it's the world is changing, and I think that's quite good. So hopefully people will remember those questions. I will try and remind them when we come back to it. I've made a note of them, so you'll see what happens. So thank you very much. What I'd like to do is to call on our second speaker, who is Councillor Antoinette Bramble, Deputy Mayor of Hackney, for her contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me this evening, and welcome to everyone. And so so good to hear a woman pioneering in a sea of men. So brilliant. So my name is Councillor Antoinette Bramble. I am the Deputy Mayor of the London Borough of Hackney. I am the Cabinet Member for Children's Social Care, Education and Young People. I'm also one of the deputy leaders of the LGA Labour Group. If you don't know what the Local Government Association does, it's a party, political, cross-party organisation that's led by elected members working alongside officers, and they represent over 300 councils across England and Wales, and yeah, we just get to speak up about local government and what does work and needs to work to make things better. And I'm also a member of the Labour Women's Network Committee and obviously part of the Co-op family. I suppose I got involved as a local councillor really because I wanted to be an advocate for my local community. I just felt that also I felt representation's important and wanted to see more people that looked like me in a position of power and influence, and also wanted to see more women in places of power and influence, and just felt that we had more to contribute, but we weren't often at the table, and wanted to get into politics even more. I also got to that stage in my life, I don't know if any of you suffer from that, but that kind of, oh my goodness, if I carry on, I'm going to become a professional armchair cynic. And I really got into that place, and I thought this is a pivotal time in my life. I either get involved in instrument change or I'll only complain and not do anything. So I thought actually it's really, really time to stand. My father is a retired civil servant, so I suppose politics was always in the background, but not something that we always talked about. And my mother is a retired senior officer in a local authority leading on education and young people, and I before used to be a head teacher, assistant head teacher in a primary school. So they really influenced me growing up. I suppose some of the things in terms of leading policy in my council that benefit women, one of the things that we have done is insourcing contracts for schools. And as you know, the majority of the workforce in those roles are women. So talking about the terms and conditions, signing the Unison's ethical care charter was something that we've done in our local authority. Making sure that we're paying the London living wage for our staff is something that we advocate for. Introducing school streets is something that we've done in Hackney as well, to think about, you know, men do the school run, but the majority of women doing the school run, and how area equality affects us all. And one of the things that I also did was develop something called Hackney's Diverse Curriculum. And what it does, it's a curriculum that talks about the Black contribution in our society. I think whether you look like me with dark skin or a beautiful complexion like Izzy, I think if we don't understand everyone that's contributed in our society, we're all robbed of our history. And when you talk about Black history in a month, it doesn't really tell the story of how this country that we call great really got to be great, and all of the stepping stones. I made that curriculum free to any school in the country that signs up will have that resource free. 500 schools, actually just under 600 schools have signed up now. 3 of those schools are international, which are Singapore, Spain and Switzerland have signed up. And what we did is I worked really closely with one of the officers in the council called Pauline, and we got Hackney teachers to write the curriculum. So I'm really proud of that. In terms of breaking the glass ceiling, if we call it that, I think that I'm really proud to be the first Black woman to be the deputy leader of the LGA Labour Group. I'm also the first Black woman to be a deputy mayor under the elected mayor model, so it's slightly different to deputy leader. But I think that for me, it's not about just about making history. I think that's brilliant. I think when we make history, it should be celebrated. But my focus has to be around legacy building, right? Because you can easily make history and not instrument the change that others come behind you and create a norm. So one of the things that I was really proud of is that in my first round as being the deputy leader on the LGA, when we appointed our board leads, that was the first time we had more women and more people from ethnic backgrounds. So again, it's great that I've made history to hold that role. I don't downplay it. I'm very proud, but actually I'm really more proud of the fact that because I sat in that chair, more people that looked like me, more women, were now in those places to share that place of influence and powers. And I think that's really how we continue to make the difference going forward. Women have been at the front line of response to the pandemic, and I don't think that they have been in the NHS or they have been respond to the pandemic in the best way that they can. You know, also women from diverse backgrounds risking their lives for us on a daily basis. The teachers that have provided lessons for those women that have been at home trying to work from home and support children to learn. Why do they call it homeschooling? It's rhetorical questions. Please comment in the chat. It's learning from home. You cannot work full time from home and hold a class. Take it from someone who's a qualified teacher. I could not be teaching a class and doing another job at the same time. Just little things like that. And I think a poignant time in our society when we think of recent events around what's just not just happened to Sarah, which is a horrible experience. I think what's really, really troubling is that unfortunately that experience isn't common, and it's still how strong and influential we are at women. That incident really highlighted just the vulnerability and how unsafe we feel as women, and actually this is a moment in time for us to think about how we instrument change. I think that how we as women ensure that we are making the difference that we can. I think I did some training. I was fortunate enough to do some training on behalf of the Labour Party in Mozambique, and trainers, some of the women that we were training were speaking to me. I did that with a colleague of mine now, and they said to me, well, how do you get a seat at the table? And I said to them simply, I get a seat at the table because I always bring my own chair. And what I mean by that is that I cannot wait for a space to be created for me. I can't bank on that the men there are going to be reasonable, sensible, polite, or what we say, oh, a true gentleman. If I bring my own seat, I'm guaranteed a place at that table. So what it means is that every situation that I walk into, I ensure that I remember I'm there because I'm invited. So I don't need to be apologetic. I don't have to wait to be called upon. I'm there within my rights. So I make sure that my voice is heard. I make sure that I indicate, I make sure I give those contributions. And I use the skills in a variety of ways, whether that's indicating to the chair, through the chair, whether it means being slightly impolite, which we find really uncomfortable. We're slightly, we're, you know, born in Britain, so I can talk about how stuffy and British we are. We find it slightly uncomfortable sometimes to do things that we need to do, but sometimes you might have to come off mute and indicate and, you know, politely remind the chair that you are indicated to speak, all the things that you need to do to be heard. Now, hear me and hear me well. We shouldn't have to work so hard to be heard, but have to ensure that we are heard. And that's what I mean about bringing your own seat to the table, in that I'm not relying on others or the climate of how meetings work to be heard. I make sure that I'm heard in that space. I think that it's really important as women that when we're in that space as well, as I just said again, remember that you are there in your own right, know your strengths. I think that I ran to be Mayor of Hackney, and I'll wind down on this point, Izzy and Sandra's chair, is that I ran to be Mayor of Hackney, and my friends, my colleagues won't mind me saying that, they were three men, three middle-class white men, they won't mind me saying that, and the boys, if I can call them boys, they were like horses that bolted out of the starting gates. They went for it. And as they went along, they will tell you they found out what they were doing. And then I just felt that if only men put themselves forward, it sends the wrong message about women. If we only men from the same ethnic background, it doesn't matter that they were white men, it was that they were all from the same ethnicity. That sends the wrong message about ethnicity. So I put myself forward, but I waited while the boys didn't. And when I spoke to some people, they said, oh, if we knew you were going for it, I would have voted for you. So there's two things to be said here. One, when you're interested in something, make sure that you go as early and as fast as you can. It doesn't matter if you don't know everything. You can do what men do all the time, go for something and learn how to do it as time moves on. So I'd encourage you to do that. And also, although I lost, that was difficult and I had to manage that. But I'm now the deputy leader of the LGA Labour group. So I, as a woman, I sit very central across local government. And I don't think if I'd taken that big step to stand up to say to everyone, I want to be mayor, I'm not sure that the doors would have opened and I'd be where I am now. So sometimes it's not always about women, it's winning, it's about taking those steps and feeling confident and learning from that level of diversity. And what I would say to everyone here is that let's work together to ensure that women in places of influence and power is the norm and not the exception. Thank you for your ears and your time, women.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. It resonated with me when you said, you know, make sure you go for it and effectively have faith in your own abilities. Years and years ago, I was a councillor and there was an election for chair of a committee and I went for it, as did a colleague, and I lost it by one vote, but I voted for them because I didn't think I could vote for myself. You know, I know better now, but it's having that inner strength and actually taking it forward that I think we're not so good at. Thank you so much. And again, hopefully people will be able to pick up some of the points you've made there. I did notice on the chat someone wanted to know how they could access your learning resources. Can I just ask, is that available to all schools across the UK or internationally, or?
That's right. If you go onto Hackney Council's website, but I'll also make sure I email you the link, Sandra, that
Fantastic.
Any school anywhere in the country can download the resources for free.
Fantastic. What you can do is, if you email them to me, I can make sure that our equalities officer at the Co-op Party's got it so that we can actually advertise it through the appropriate networks. Thank you again. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Elaine Dean, who's Vice President of the Central England Co-op, to give us her thoughts on our theme for this evening. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you. Right, well, I'm going to talk about how we effected change at Central England Co-op and how that was actually very much a majority of women who did that. But to get there, I'm just going to give you a bit of my own background because I've been doing this now for 41 years. So, and I've got a lot of history behind that. So it sort of builds up really to what's happened. So how did I get involved in the co-op movement? Well, basically I was born into it because my family's got over 200 years of collective service to the former Derby Society. My grandfather did 50 years, my father 48. My feistiness is genetic entirely. My maternal grandmother was a suffragette and her sister, my great aunt, was PA to Mary Stopes at the first birth control clinic in London. I've been a campaigner, I think, all my life. I also got female magistrates allowed to wear trousers. That, I mean, that's sort of silly stuff, you know, but it's making the point, and not having to make the sandwiches. That was quite a biggie at the time. But on a more serious note, working with the late Lord Jack Ashley to ensure that rape victims were not named in court. That was a really critical one, and something I'm really proud of being involved in. And I've been an elected director for 41 years. I know I don't look old enough, but I have. So I made my debut, my co-op debut was 2 weeks old at the Derby Co-op Sports Ground. My great uncle had been the founder member of the Welfare Club, and his portrait hung over the door inside the clubhouse. I played tennis there until it was sold for building land. when I was about 21. But to this very day, I remain vice chair of the bowls club, even though I don't play bowls, you know. So I was always loyal to the co-op. But I went away to university, became a teacher, and I wasn't particularly active in any way until we had a new chief executive arrived at what was then the Derby and Burton Society, Gilbert Hyatt. Some people may remember. I didn't really take an awful lot of notice of the board either. I was, you know, pursuing my career, and the co-op board was sort of very distant. They all seemed to be very fusty old men in pinstripe suits, and there was a couple of guild ladies who always wore hats. But then this culture started of bullying and management by fear. To cut a long story short there, my father was one of those who was on the receiving end of sort of 4-hour rants, and who ended up shaken and unable to sleep and so on. If ever he was going on holiday, you got it, you know, you got your rant the day you were going, and then you were told that he would see you the day that you came back. He'd continue. So your holiday was wrecked because all you're doing is dreading. So that's how it all worked. It was horrible, evil stuff. And I can remember my mother and I saying, what can we do about it? What can we do about this? Because Dad was quite mild, the sort of gentleman who raised his hat to ladies. And he believed in educating a daughter, and he championed social justice. And I said to my mother, well, who is on the board? Who is allowing all this to happen? So we looked them up and we checked the rules. And I said to her, I qualify to stand and I'm going to. And I'm not putting up with this. And my mother said, you can't. You're pregnant. So I said, well, there's nothing in the rules about that. You know, it doesn't disqualify you. So I'm doing it. So I didn't tell anybody that I was pregnant. And no one actually found out until almost the end of the election campaign. 13 people stood for 6 places, and I got one of the places, and I was the only woman that was elected. So I joined forces with a group of 5 men. They were brilliant. We'd all been elected on a similar ticket of stopping the bullying, and we made a huge difference to it. Amongst these men were the works convener, the regional chair and the regional secretary of Usdaw, and 2 retired store managers. And we really were a pretty good team. The chief executive thought that I'd lose interest after I'd had the baby, but that of course didn't happen. He constantly tried to find out when the baby was due, and kindly gave me some information about one of his relatives that had died in childbirth. But I told him not to get his hopes up because I got childbearing hips and I'd be fine. So I'd like to say that the other 3 elderly women on the board were supportive, but they weren't. They absolutely hated me because I questioned the chief executive on policy, and I wasn't particularly interested in their strawberry teas and jumble sales. One said that the men were very worried about me, and she thought that I should stop at home until after the baby was born. She said, because we don't want this baby born in the boardroom, do we? So I said, well, which of the men are worried? She didn't say, she didn't answer. And I said, well, Mr. Middleton, the works convener, he's delivered 3 of his 5 children. So I'd probably be in, you know, safe and experienced hands. And she just looked me up and down and she said, you brazen hussy. And off she went. So that's what it was like. But on the day that the chief executive thought that the nearest to when the baby was due, he put a lot of shop closures on the agenda. And we had pledged to oppose shop closures. My male colleagues were all ringing me up, telling me to put my feet up, not take hot baths and don't drink gin. But I made it to the meeting, and during it, of course, you guess what's going. I had this searing pain, and I leaned across to my neighbour, who was a 50-year-old bachelor, the chair of Usdaw, and I explained that I got a pain. And he sort of looked over his specs at me and he said, well, you've got 2 choices, duck. He said, you either roll on the floor screaming and get the meeting abandoned, or you stick it out. So I stuck it out. So we had quite a lot of mergers, and I became the vice chair of my area board, first woman to hold any office like that, and chair of the member relations committee. I'm still there 41 years later. having served 3 years as vice president, 3 years as president, and I'm back to being vice president at the moment. And it's, of course, it's Central England Society now. 3 years is the maximum time you can serve as president in one go. And during that time, I've played my part in the wider movement as well. I joined the Midlands and South Wales Section Education Council, and then on the Education Executive, and I see Adrienne Lowe's on the call. I met her there many, many years ago. And that was when we were at Stamford Hall. And then on the college governors, from around, I can't exactly remember, about 1984, and involved in all that until about 2011. So I've been a member of the Co-op Party, of course, since 1981, and for a number of years was the local branch secretary. I've also been 20 years as a magistrate, like Christina, nominated I was by a Labour MP. In 2008, elected to the board of Co-op Press, and that was like the pinnacle of everything, because I've always been a champion of co-op news since I was very young. It used to run periodic colouring competitions, and it was always on the table at home. It was read in our house. And in 2013, my colleagues on the board elected me chair, where I stayed until 2 years ago, where I've had to take a year out for good governance under rule. And I returned last year as vice chair, and I'm still vice chair of Co-op Press. I also was a founding member of a football supporters trust for Derby County, which is a cooperative, of course. The supporters trusts are cooperatives. I was the first democratically elected chair of that, which was quite unusual for a female. And then, to my astonishment, I thought I'll have a tilt at standing for the board of the governing body, Supporters Direct. I actually got elected. The chair then was a fairly unknown Labour MP called Andy Burnham, which is where I got to know him very well and respect him as a politician who, in my opinion, should one day lead the Labour Party. That was in 2004, 2005. In 2010, due to the lack of women, I somehow or other managed to persuade Dame Pauline Green to join me and to stand to be the very high profile chair that we needed at that time. I did have to explain to her the offside rule. I can remember sitting watching a football match and having to go through everything with her and explain how it all worked. But she gave us 3 brilliant years. And then in 2013, my colleagues elected me as vice chair of Supporters Direct. So I was a woman very much in a man's world there. So all this was going on, and I felt that I was carrying a cooperative flag, and I was concentrating on the things in which I was involved. And I thought to myself, well, I'll stand again for the main board of what was then Midlands Society. I was the regional board, the chair of the regional board, but somehow I didn't have a very happy feeling about what was happening, and the society seemed to be controlled by a group of people who didn't take it seriously and who didn't behave like true cooperators. And this was 2012. I returned to the main board, Central England, absolutely shocked at what I found there. It felt more like a PLC board. Some people actually walked into the boardroom tearing open the seal on their unread board papers. Some sat snoozing. Some never spoke at all, and never once did anyone speak up about anything or ask how anything that they were proposing to do was to do with the was going to affect the employees. It was all lots of volunteers for stopping in posh hotels and attending slap-up dinners. It was pretty awful, to be honest. And the management, of course, all male, were just pleasing themselves, and they were taking what I thought were some very uncooperative decisions, which seemed unchallenged. There were 6 of us on the board against 10, and the 10 thought we were boat rockers, and I was apparently described as a very dangerous woman. Now, in 2012, things starting to come to a head. A long-serving, brilliant co-op-y person, who I am certain is well known to 99% of people on this call, was forced out of a job that he loved. And then in 2013, a completely nonsensical case of breach of the code of conduct was brought against me, causing me to be suspended from the board after an election was held, which we all believe was rigged. I knew the rules, and I knew that they didn't have enough numbers to vote me off, but they didn't seem to realise that. In a showdown kangaroo court, my nephew-in-law, who's a doctor of law, and myself absolutely battered the case against me, and I had to be reinstated. But that fired something inside of me, the build-up of our colleague losing his job and what they were trying to do to me, sort of kicked this off. And around another 30 truly cooperative people decided we got to do something to turn our co-op round. And luckily for us, in 2014, there was all-out elections after the merger with Anglia. And we all got together and we fielded a slate of 10 candidates, all committed to total change. I honestly expected the guns to be out and us to be trounced. But 7 of our 10 got elected, giving us a majority on the board with the president's casting vote. Maria Lee was elected president. She was on the call earlier. I know she got to go to another meeting. I think she's probably gone. But Maria Lee was elected president. You'll all know her because she's on your National Executive Committee. And I was her vice president. And we set about the task of turning our co-op round. It wasn't easy. And we hit many roadblocks. We had a lot of sleepless nights. It seemed endlessly going 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But we set up many subcommittees. We made sure that the co-op people were all in the majority. We also secured the annual funding for the co-op party on a 3-year agreement, which had to be approved at members' meetings. And that had looked very flaky in 2012-13. I know that the officers then were very concerned that this wasn't going to happen and we weren't going to get this. But it worked out. So it took 3 years of really tough time for Maria's presidency, but we kept going forward, guided by our values and principles. And although we were quite a disparate group of people, we stuck together. And a special word here for former party NEC member, the late Graham Watkins. In his mid-70s, he was absolutely formidable on our board. He was brilliant. And he rewrote the Society Party Council rules for us to reflect a greater cross-section of active members right across the society. So then it's my turn to be president, and much of the really tough internal structure type work had been done by Maria. But I concentrated on networking across the movement nationally and indeed internationally, being invited to speak at the conference at the National Co-operative Business Association of America in Washington, DC in October 2017. We resurrected the Women's Challenge, and we've now held 4 brilliant Women's Voices events and 1 men's, and with 1 men's, 1 coming up shortly, and rebuilding relationships with, for example, the retired employees associations, because they'd all been sort of drifted apart and they all felt very unloved. The main change was the departure of the chief executive. Now, don't get me wrong, the business was running well. It just didn't feel to us it was very co-op-y. He ran it well. We were making a good profit. He was a good business operator. But we had the chance here to appoint a true co-operator who'd lead the society with our vision and values. I'd already had a bit of experience on a much smaller scale with the appointment of Rebecca Harvey as editor of Co-op News on my watch. And as I'm sure many of you know, that was an inspired appointment. So myself and Jane Avery, who's the current president, and along with Richard Bickle, who I'm sure a lot of you know, knew the minute that Debbie Robinson walked in that room that here was someone who shared our values and principles and who lived her own life according to these ethics. And as everyone now knows, she has been the most inspired appointment. Her culture changes right across our society have been phenomenal. And the amazing thing is that on her appointment, 2 male executives resigned, having found other positions. And we ended up with a female chief executive, a female chief operating officer, and the very long-serving Tracy Orr, whose light had been very much kept hidden under a bushel, and a chief financial officer, Louise McFadgen. So this team has proved absolutely sensational for 2 years now. Female president and vice president. We've turned the corner. We've also had 2 younger people appointed to the board, 1 male, 1 female. And today will be hopefully taking over the banner. So it's a case really of sticking at what you believe in. Don't be deflected, don't give up, don't walk away. As Debbie said on her first day when she was talking to me when I was the president, she said, you have to be the change that you want to see. So, you know, you live your life according to cooperative values, champion the just causes, and fight for true equality and social justice, which is exactly what our political wing, the Co-op Party, is doing. So that's my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. And I think the key thing that I've got there is dangerous women are formidable, and we can all be dangerous women.
We can.
Thank you so much. Now I'm looking at the time. What I would like to do, can I ask the three speakers, are you all able to stay with us for the
Yes.
breakout? You're okay to stay with us? Fantastic. So what I was going to suggest then is that we set up and start the breakout session. The idea being that give half an hour for perhaps a slightly more informal discussion. Come back then as a big group at 10 to 8, and then feedback, and if anybody's got any burning questions that have not been able to ask you, that we can perhaps have a couple of questions at the end as well, just to wrap it up. Is everybody happy with that? Hello, I think we're all starting to come back. We didn't realise we had to click on leave room to get back. So yes, numbers are rapidly climbing up. Once we've got everybody back, what I will do is I'll ask the facilitators of the two rooms just to give a quick sort of 2-minute summary as to what was said, and if we still have the three speakers, what I may do is ask them just to give a final word, because we're getting very close to the end of the session.
Sandra, while we wait, can I just spotlight Iram so everyone can see her wonderful poster?
If Iram doesn't mind, is that okay with you, Iram? It looks like it's okay with her. Fantastic.
Can you see that, everybody, behind Iram?
That is really clever.
I think we need a copy of that, Iram. You need to scan it in and send it, please. That would be wonderful. Or vote cooperative as well.
We should say vote Labour and cooperative. How are we doing? I think we're getting most people back.
I think we're all back now, Sandra.
Okay. Have we still got the three speakers with us, or have they had to leave? So I can't see everybody.
Yeah, they're all still here. Thanks.
Fantastic. So what I was saying as we were waiting is I'm going to ask the facilitators from the two groups just to give us a quick feedback as to sort of the key themes that came out, just for a couple of minutes. And then what I was going to do is perhaps ask the three speakers if they could give us perhaps just 2 minutes each, just to sum up how they've found the session, because we're very close on time, and I don't think we're going to have time to actually ask some questions, not unless you want to be here for quite a while. It's certainly the breakout session I was in, it was really lively discussion, really interesting, and I suspect we probably could have done an extra hour without any problem at all, subject of course to our all domestic arrangements. So can I ask one of the facilitators from the power group perhaps to come forward? I'm not quite sure whether Joyce or Lola. Oh, we seem to have.
I'll let Joyce give the feedback.
Fantastic. I like the way you delegated. Well experienced. So
unmute yourself.
I'm fine. Okay.
Hi, Joyce.
Well, we had a really great session. What we found was a lot of the ladies were supported by the male members, but not always by women. Childcare wasn't made easy. Women not always supportive and undermining some of the women. One lady went down for a master's degree. Her and 5 men got the job, But the communications, she said, a lot of people don't know what the cooperative party is. We need more communications to let people know exactly what the cooperative is all about. One lady doesn't like leaders of hierarchies, thinks cooperatives should work together, which is what we are supposed to do. Be community activists, equalities, have parental leave, not just for women, but for men. And girls should be told by their parents that they're equal. Everyone should be equal. And that's the way it's gone throughout. Very many women find that other women do not support them. Well, girls, we're here for you, so we will be supporting you. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I suspect Nina's going to be the delegated one from the other, just to give the feedback from the discussion there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, a massive thank you to the fantastic women that contributed as well, or those that listened in and put comments in the chat or soaked it all up and will have something to reflect on. It was a fantastic discussion. And sort of the key theme coming out was about how really, although we were discussing wealth, that wealth and power are so interlinked, and we've really got to look at how we can, as a cooperative women's network, look to support those women within our movement, to support them to gain that wealth and to gain that power. Some of the real key themes that came out, some brilliant themes looking about how actually the pandemic has been incredibly damaging to women's wealth, and they have suffered more from. And so actually this is a moment of opportunity and actual need that we need to find how we can support women to share that wealth more equally. And the key theme as well then coming out was actually what we need to do to try and do that as a movement moving forward is to look at kindness, how we can be kind to each other, raise each other up. There's so many discussion points that we've collated, and we'll make sure that we share those with you all as well. But thank you so much. It was a brilliant discussion, really interesting to hear people's experiences. And as a network, I think it's really helped us to hear you, to listen to you, and to see how we can move forward to support you as we move forward in the year ahead. And I'll be quiet there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. I echo that. I was making notes as people was talking, and I've got about 2 pages of notes of ideas that women were coming up with in their contributions. So thank you for your contribution, and hopefully as a committee, the Women's Network Committee will be able to pull together some of these ideas to help influence what the party executive look to do, and also to try and bring out more policies, more events like this, that we can actually pick up on some of those things and try and be proactive, which would be fantastic.
It was great, thank you. But we've to raise our profile outside.
Most definitely, and that was one of the points that came up, as was something that came up very loud and clear, was as sisters we need to look out for each other.
We do.
We need to be kinder to each other.
Yeah.
Can I, as a it's 8 o'clock, perhaps just to finish off, ask our 3 speakers if they'd be willing just to give us 2 minutes of their reflections on this evening's event, and perhaps if we do it in reverse order and let Elaine go first.
Right, okay, thank you. Reflecting, it's always disappointing when people say that other women haven't supported them. I found that very disappointing to have to listen to that, because I think it's really incumbent upon all of us to support other women, to bring younger women forward, because we have to have a succession plan. We are only the custodians of cooperatives, and we have to be able to move forward and move on and let younger people take our place, and we have to make sure that they have the right ideals, the right values and principles. So very disappointing to hear that that so many women haven't had support from other women. and also empathizing with the childcare issues, absolutely ridiculous. I was told for one co-op group AGM meeting back in the 80s that There wasn't a creche, but I could leave my child at a creche in the Armdale Centre and go on to the meeting. Like, yes, I'd just come up to Manchester, dump my child in you know, somebody hadn't got a clue. So we have to make it easier for women with childcare. We have to make things easy for women. We have to support other women. And as I said earlier, we have to be the change that we want to see and lead by example.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So perhaps we could move now to Antoinette, just for her final thoughts.
Thank you. First of all, thank you everyone for coming and sharing and contributing. It's always encouraging when you are in a safe space with other women. What I would say is just remember that your voice is your platform, and wherever you are, you can instrument change. You can get into elective office, and we should see more women in senior places in politics. Absolutely agree with that, but you don't have to hold those positions to effect change, and I think that's really important. You know, colleagues before said it's disappointing when other women don't support other women. It is, but you know, just be mindful of that. You know, we're human, everybody's on a journey, people are in different spaces. It would be nice if we are all sisterly and camaraderie, but if it isn't, don't let that discourage you. Just find women that you can network and will support you. I think the most important thing that I would want every woman to come away with is know your strength. Don't compare yourself to anyone. Know who you are. What are your strengths? And then use those strengths and those skills and utilize that to move forward in anything that you want to do going forward. But don't try and rely less on external validation. Just focus on what you're good at, know your strengths, and then remember that you can utilize that to do anything that you want to do. You know, be the change that you want to see. You absolutely can. And anyone who tells you different is just fundamentally wrong.
I'm jealous. Thank you so much. So finally, with great thanks, I'll move now to Christina.
Thank you. Well, I'd just like to wind up by saying we've come a long way, but we've still got so far to go. And I was quite disappointed to hear how women weren't supporting women. But then I reflected on my own life and I thought, well, yeah, that's happened to me as well. And it shouldn't. And my life is slightly sort of schizophrenic. I work in Parliament in the biggest men's club there is. And then I come back to my beautiful Neath constituency where women play a leading role in every way possible. So I'm very optimistic that that we can mentor each other through, and whether it was in sport or in politics, I've always tried to help women and mentor them through. And I think that if we're there for each other, whether it's just to listen, and the contributions tonight have been absolutely astounding. And I'll end on thanking Valerie, who said she was 90 on the call tonight. Doesn't look 90, but I'd like to thank Valerie because that makes me not the oldest person on the call tonight.
Thank you so much. So thank everybody for taking part, for being with us, for sharing your thoughts and enabling us to have a wealth of ideas to take us forward. We have a fantastic equalities officer in Chantal Lee, and she is putting things together, so hopefully you will find more stuff coming on the website, and we'll have blogs and articles, and hopefully we'll be able to generate more stuff that you can engage with. We have a Facebook page. If you're not already signed up and you use Facebook, please join us. Nina is our current Twitter expert. So again, if you want to follow us on Twitter, we have that as well. Thank you, everybody. I think we all deserve a very nice cup of tea or something stronger, depending on your taste. Good night and thank you.